All right. So hello, everyone, and welcome to our fourth Tribal Drought webinar this year. My name is Stefan Tangen. I'm a Tribal Resilience Liaison for the North Central region. I work directly for the Great Plains Tribal Water Alliance in coordination with the North Central Climate Adaptation Science Center. I'm hosting this from the traditional lands of the Ute, Arapaho, and Cheyenne, and numerous other Indigenous peoples in Denver, Colorado. The Great Plains Tribal Water Alliance is a nonprofit intertribal organization that serves as an advisory board to the Great Plains Tribal Chairmen's Association on all matters related to technical and policy issues regarding the water resources of member tribal nations. And if you want to learn more about the Water Alliance or the Climate Adaptation Science Center, I'll put some links in the chat here in a minute. The goal of this monthly webinar is to provide information, tools, and resources for tribal resource managers to use in addressing climate change. In this webinar series, we're focusing on drought, trying to bring resources to you about regional and local impacts and resources for addressing drought, as well as information that's useful both near and long term. Today, we have folks from NOAA, NOAA-NIDIS, and hopefully when Mark joins us from the Sac and Fox tribe of Missouri in Kansas and Nebraska. This webinar is a collaboration with several organizations from NOAA's National Integrated Drought Information System, or NIDIS. We have Britt Parker, Molly Woloshin, and Crystal Stiles. At the USDA Climate Hub, Danelle Peck, and then Doug Kluck from NOAA's National Center for Environmental Information. Just a little bit about NIDIS before we get started. NIDIS was established in 2006 by public law with a mission to improve the nation's capacity to proactively manage drought-related risks by providing those affected with the best available information and resources to assess the potential for drought and to better prepare for, mitigate, and respond to the effects of drought. NIDIS is building the foundation of a national drought early warning system, or DEWS, through the development of regional DEWS, where networks of partners and stakeholders share information and actions that help communities cope with drought. For a deeper dive into resources, such as up-to-date and historical data regarding drought, I recommend checking out NIDIS's website. There's a plethora of information there for all sorts of different drought-related questions and interests, so definitely check it out. The National Drought Mitigation Center, National Integrated Drought Information System, and the U.S. Department of Agriculture Climate Hubs are all working with states, tribes, and others across the country to collect condition monitoring observer reports on drought, or they call it CMOR drought, including photos. So your impact reports help us understand how drought is affecting local conditions and you. State officials and U.S. Drought Monitor authors review the reports to help verify what indicators are showing and to identify areas that need more attention. So a really helpful thing. And you can also check drought impact reports for your area. And then if you're in Montana, you can use the Montana Impact Report in the same way. To learn more about these links, we'll also put some links in the chat box for you. Just a note, if you have questions throughout the presentations, we would love to see them in the chat box, or after each presenter, you can take yourself off mute. We'll try to create some space to ask questions directly, or you can wait till the end, whatever is most convenient to you. Our first speaker is Doug Kluck, and Doug is in the Central Region Climate Services Director for the National Oceanic Atmospheric Administration, or NOAA. Doug is from Nebraska, but has lived in Kansas City since 2000. Doug, you want to go ahead?
Okay, let's see. Just to get the logistics out of the way here. Are you seeing the half screen or the full screen?
Full screen.
All right, that's amazing. So hello, everybody. Yep, as Stefan said, thank you, Stefan, for the introduction. I'm Doug Kluck. I sit in Kansas City. I've been around a long time. So anyway, I'm going to give you a quick, it's going to be too quick because I got a lot to say in very little time. If Mark doesn't show up, maybe I have a long time. Anyway, these are conditions across, these pictures are conditions of Montana. The right two pictures pretty much dried up, and that's what we call pineapple corn. looks like pineapple growing it, not corn. And I think that was from Minnesota, actually, earlier in the year. Anyway, I guess this is the theme. I'm going to cut to the chase and get all the stuff out in case I run out of time today with all the things I was going to show. It's dry. I don't need to tell you that, but I do need to reiterate why that's important to bring up now. We're in the middle of what should be part of the recharge season from now. Well, really now through spring is recharge. When I say recharge, I really mean for reservoirs, ponds, and soil moisture. And since we've lost so much of that, we have a long way to go. As you all know, frozen soils, every place north of here or north of Nebraska, whatever, tends to freeze during the winter time at some point, and that prevents the infiltration of water. Now, if it's super dry, it won't prevent that as much, but it's still an obstacle for soils once they freeze for much water to penetrate it. So we're kind of hoping that these warmer days, at least before it gets too cold, get some precipitation so it can sink in a little bit. It hasn't happened much yet. As I said, soils are super thirsty. Runoff next spring, as of right now anyway, looks like it's going to be lower to much lower than normal. And what I guess I'll say, don't be surprised if you get a decent rain event or snow event or whatever, and it all melts and you don't have any runoff whatsoever. Would not be surprising. Fall into winter is into early spring actually is a relatively dry time of year for this neck of the woods, and I'm really talking about the Missouri Basin and the northern Missouri Basin for the most part, not including the higher elevations where they can actually get a lot of precipitation in the mountains in terms of snow, right? That's where we build up our snow supplies. La Nina is coming. What that means is, what that really boils down to is during La Nina years, we tend to be a little wetter, especially in Montana and Wyoming. The further north, the wetter it is generally, and it tends to actually be a little cooler when you average things out too sometimes, not every time. Now, last year was La Nina and it didn't work out. The forecast didn't work out as well as we'd hoped they would have. Yeah, and again, if you ask me about general trends across our area, it's generally warmer, especially in the cooler seasons, and wetter, but that's a complicated picture. Some years, as you know, can be super, super wet, like 2018 and 2019 were. And then we can have years like last year were sort of not so wet. So just because the trend is up in terms of wetness doesn't mean we're going to necessarily have that for a few years. Is this going to be a multi-year drought? It's another question we get all the time. It could be, and it wouldn't be unusual if it were a 2-year or 3-year drought, whatever. Wouldn't surprise most of us. It's not unusual to have multi-year drought periods, looking at the record and such. If we get average snow or rain or precipitation well, in the next 6 months, is that going to end the drought? Well, absolutely not. But obviously it'll improve things. But the problem is we're working at such a negative or a deficit that it's going to take, like the next comment is, a lot of rain events and precipitation events to really get us up where we need to be. Otherwise, the danger here is if we get average everything, say everything averages out to normal, we're going to be sort of building upon, we're going to be increasing our risk as we get to the warmer time of the year next year, because it could flip on a dime again and be super dry, even though it's been average or normal precipitation. Plus we have this big deficit. So our soils need to get a lot wetter than they currently are. This is looking at the last water year, and the last water year begins on October 1st. So we're starting a brand new year tomorrow in a lot of ways. In the West, we talk about water years. So temperatures on the left, and wherever you see yellow to orange to red, that's above normal for the last year over all these areas up to the north, right? Both the Dakotas and Montana, really warm. That's very warm. For a whole year to be 3 degrees above normal or more is pretty incredible, actually. And then here's on the right is the percent of normal precipitation. So anybody in the red area is at least only 70% of normal and likely worse. And there's some places that show up as worse in terms of less than half of their normal precipitation, extending all the way from Minnesota, well, to Idaho and lots of other places. A lot of dry areas up in the northern part of the Missouri Basin. And you go further south, there's some green showing up, which is near to above normal. And this is how it ranks out in terms of that year, how it ranks out in terms of dryness. And compared to the whole record since 1895, 119th in North Dakota out of 126 years. So seventh driest year, or seventh, sorry, on the left, seventh warmest year on record. Sorry, left is temperature, right is precipitation. It's actually worse for precipitation. It's the fifth driest in North Dakota, and of course South Dakota not far behind, and same with all the surrounding states. Just a terrible year when it comes to heat and lack of precipitation. Okay, this summer obviously didn't help that. If you look at it for a year, it looks bad. If you look at it just for last summer, it's bad. It's worse in terms of temperatures. Just almost record temperatures in our neck of the woods. Definitely record temperatures as you go west onto the West Coast and such, and Intermountain West out there in Idaho and such. Luckily, we didn't get record heat. And then again, dryness. These colors indicate the lower the number, the closer you are to record dry. Indicate pretty dry conditions here too. So how does this summer, this last June, July, and August really measure up? And really, we should start throwing September in here because it was no treat either. How did it measure up in terms of the record? Well, it actually tied or beat. We're not quite sure yet. For the 48 lower states, the warmest it's ever been. This is a map of where the record is in terms of, well, in 2021, for example, out west, that was all record heat out there, and same in northern Minnesota. Across the Missouri Basin, it's split into 2 years. 1936 was a little warmer, and so was 1934 in the lower basin. But as a whole, all 48 states, this was a record year in terms of heat. So the last 30 days, I wish I could stop repeating myself, but last 30 days in terms of temperature on the left, again, 3, 4, 5 degrees above normal. Had record heat up in 100 degrees in North Dakota a day or two ago. Craziness, and really everybody was. So, and then in terms of precipitation, yep, there was some, and there has been a little bit in some places, but where it's the worst drought, it's stayed dry for the most part. Stream flows well below normal. I won't spend a lot of time on that. Soil moisture, as I said earlier, I don't need to show you this, wherever it's brown, whatever, red, it's below normal, way below normal. The image on the left is the Drought Monitor Map. Something comes out every month, right? Or every week, sorry. The worst it can get, the worst color it can be is that dark maroon or reddish color. And that's the worst. That's 1 in 50 years or worse sort of drought. And we've been stuck in that for quite a while in Montana. There was more of that to the east in different parts of Minnesota and North Dakota earlier in the year, but it's improved somewhat. I think the key message for these two images, the image on the right, and this is the message for this is the 1-year change map. So going into the new water year, all right, we're heading into a brand new water year starting tomorrow. Are we worse off or are we better off? than we were last year, almost on the same exact date. And the answer is, well, it depends, but mostly, especially if you're in the Dakotas or Montana, worse. And that's worrisome to a lot of folks. I would say the basin as a whole is drier than it was last year. Yes, there's some green here and there where it was a little bit wet, where it is a little bit wetter than it was last year at this time. But for the most part, it's worse to a lot worse. So our risk is much higher than it was last year. Here's the outlook for till the end of the year, till December 31st. This will be updated in a few weeks. That yellow area just shows where expansion of drought is expected, and that's due to La Nina. I'll show you what that means in a minute. There is some improvement on the docket from northwest Montana. That's the hope, and that's also La Nina associated. So we'll see if that happens. We're hoping that happens. We're hoping, but the brown area is where they don't think drought is going to really improve, at least by the end of the year. It doesn't mean the winter, it just means by the end of this calendar year. Here's the outlook for the next 7 days in terms of precipitation. If you added up all the precipitation for the next 7 days, according to the models and a few other things, this is what you get. Note where there's no precipitation, which is basically Montana. Those states I've mentioned 10 times already, okay? So it's gonna stay dry the next 7 days, most likely. Lower basin gets a little rain. There is hope. I'll say one positive thing in this whole thing. So this is next week. Looking, I think this is as of yesterday. Yeah, I didn't get the brand new ones, but as of yesterday, below normal. I'm sorry, temperature on the left. For the most part, above normal temperatures are going to average out over that 8 to 14 day week 2, October 7th to the 13th. And if you look at the precipitation map down on the right, lower right, you'll see this big green above blob or jelly bean sort of appear over the west and sort of surrounding kind of a bullseye out there. We're hoping that comes true. That's an indication that things may be shifting a little bit, at least in the short term, to a little bit of wetter conditions. We hope that kind of sticks in there for a while, because it would be it's an important time of year to get that moisture out there. This is the outlook for October, the entire month of October. This will be updated tomorrow at some point. But for now, above normal temperatures for the most part for our area, being in the Missouri Basin, northern plains. And then the monthly precipitation outlook on the right, for the most part, says equal chances of above, below, or near normal. A little bit of dryness in Kansas and such. October through December, through the end of the year, really on the temperature scale, it's sort of undetermined. So it's could go anyway. Could go cool, could go wet, or it could be near normal. That's sort of the forecast at the moment. The hopeful sign is this above on the precipitation outlook into western Montana. We hope that comes true, where the green is, and we hope the brown doesn't come true. But that's a La Nina signature, being south to our south, being drier than normal. It's pretty common during La Nina, and this is pushing a couple months further into the future. Equal chances again on temperature for the most part, in the upper basin a little warmer in the south, leaning that way anyway, in terms of temperature. But more importantly, precipitation looks like it should be above normal. Again, for Montana and portions of Wyoming. Now that's not a strong probability. That's a fairly weak probability, but it's there. It's better than having it dry, that's for sure. And this is just a picture of what La Nina can mean and often means in terms of cool and wet conditions reaching into the northern plains and actually into Montana and such more frequently during these conditions, La Nina conditions, and dryness to our south. And if you really want a discussion on La Nina, we'll do that some other time. I won't go through all these key points because I just talked about them all. But it'll be something you can have if Stefan wants to send them out. I will point to our next monthly climate summary and outlook webinar, which we do every month, on October 21st, and you can sign up with that to find to listen to the spiel again. However, it'll have a lot more depth and cover a lot more area for the north central part of the U.S. And I am done.
Thanks, Doug. And yeah, actually, we have more time than you thought.
Oh, I do? Okay. Well,
So-
the key word here is we need more widespread precipitation events. If we don't see them, our risk level is going to creep up and up and up. And we don't want to rely 100% on spring rainfall, because if we miss, you know what happens if we miss spring rains. It's bad. It is bad news. Like it happened this year. Really bad. So we're already sitting in a pretty vulnerable position. That's the word. And, you know, hopefully things will turn around and bring the forecasts don't really show a lot of that yet, but stay tuned, I guess, is the best way to say that. Yeah. So I'll take any questions if anybody has any.
Mike's got a question here for you, Doug. It says, will NOAA be putting out a winter forecast, and when would that typically come out?
Oh, Mike's such a good guy. Of course, yes. Every October, it will be on the 21st of October as well. So it'll be right before we do our webinar. There was something called a winter outlook, and we usually do that in October on the 21st. So yeah, NOAA will be putting that out then. We'll also be putting out something about La Nina, a little bit more information about La Nina, like a little one-page document, sort of telling you what that is and what it means, what it could mean, what we hope it means for us. And that'll come out following that. So late October, early November.
Yeah, this is Denise again. I was just talking to a farmer yesterday, and you know they were saying you know, plant in the dust, your bins will bust. And I asked him, you know, how his yields were, and he said that his yields were really good, better than he thought. And it's like, and then I bit my tongue, and it's like, well, I hope we don't continue with this drought, because you may not be singing that song next year. So there's just a little bit of a harvest information there.
Where was this farmer, Denise?
This was in eastern central Nebraska, Thurston County.
Yeah, that's not the worst drought area. So
Right.
yeah, yeah, and I don't know if he has irrigation or not, but if he does,
No.
sort of, he does not. Okay, all right.
Because I know I live on the Iowa side, and I know the Iowa side on the central western Iowa, the drought is a little bit more intense there than. It's kind of interesting to watch the rain as it goes. Sometimes it goes right west from west to east. Sometimes it goes down the river and doesn't go on one side or the other. It's very interesting. You have a very fascinating job there, Doug, because I like to watch the weather. It's just fascinating to watch. And then I wanted to make sure that you said you're going to have further update on La Nina in late October, early November?
That's the plan.
Okay. All right. Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mark, do you have your hand raised? Do you want to say?
Yeah, I also want to make sure you can hear me.
Yeah, we can. You sound great.
Excellent. My question to Doug was regarding some of the outlook maps, and it seems like they've changed again. They're a little bit sharper, but the legends I think make it a little bit tougher to read. I kind of like the version before this a little bit better. Did they just change like in the last 2 weeks or something?
Doug?
Unmute myself. That's a
There you
good
go.
idea. Yes, it's gone through a process, and I think with a lot of outside people telling us that the maps that we used before were not so great. So it's interesting to hear that you don't like them as well. I actually like them a lot better for a lot of reasons. They seem cleaner. They're really no difference. except that they're less technical. And I'd be interesting to hear why you think they're more technical or less easy to use.
Now I got to go figure out what color green is 70 to 80, and it's
Oh,
is that the
yeah,
light
yeah.
green? Is that the mid-light green? Is that the dark green? You know, and
Yeah, got
I
it.
got it,
got
and I'm not colorblind. I'm just blind.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah, I understand that. That makes sense. And the variations there are pretty slight. That's a good point. Good point. Now, what I will say is that few people who use these, like I just showed them, don't really care about those percentages too much. Most, I'm not saying every, but a lot of people don't care. They just want to see where it's one color or the other. And I'll tell you this about these forecasts: the higher that percentage is, the probability percentage is also their confidence level, right? It's not just the models telling them that. That's their. So, in this example, next week, that's a pretty strong precipitation bullseye, if you will, out in western U.S. Now, by the time you get to eastern Montana and the Dakotas, not so much. So even though it's leaning, we say leaning that way, it's not a huge, not a strong prediction. How about that?
Right.
So we got one more question before we move to Mark. This comes from Michael Downey. With the hot and dry weather continuing potentially up to freeze up, what are the metrics we should be looking at for coming out of drought in the next few months?
Coming out of drought? Oh my goodness, Mike. Coming out of, well, I think you mean, I hope you mean improving drought, because if we came out of drought in the next few months, it would be a double extreme event. I don't know what to call it. It would be an incredible thing, because we would be talking 10 to maybe 15 inches by the end of the year.
Just leaning that way. I'm just being hopeful
just
that maybe we're going to get some improvement. And
yeah.
So what metrics do we look at to maybe indicate that's the case, that things are just improving?
Yeah, it's good. That's really, really a good thing to think about. Like I said earlier, and this is a tendency we all have, because I know I would do the same thing too. I'd look outside and say, oh, it's raining. Okay, that's great. Conditions must be getting better, right? Well, again, if we're just getting average precipitation, we're not really improving that much that quickly. Okay, maybe a little bit, because this time of year, after all the plants shut down, right? They're not evapotranspirating anymore. It allows that moisture to soak in a little bit better than it does when the plants are all growing crazy, right? What I'm afraid, though, is, or what I sort of don't want to happen, is for us to flip and say, oh, the drought must be over. We can improve things here, where really we've only wetted part of that soil moisture, sort of soil moisture and such, and we really don't know what the mountains are doing. It's way, 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 way too early to even guesstimate on how well the mountains are going to do in terms of snowpack, right? So, in fact, you almost have to wait till February or something like that to get a good handle on snowpack in the mountains. And so we'll see. I guess we'll see what happens, Mike. But metrics, I would watch. Yeah, you know what? I'd watch your stream flows, and I'd watch your soil moisture, and see if it goes up and at what depth it goes up, because it doesn't. As you well know, it doesn't take that much once we switch back over to growing season again to dry it all up pretty quickly.
Thanks, Doug. Thanks for the question, Mike. Do you want to stop screen share, Doug? There you go. And Mark, I don't know if you had something you wanted to share. If not, it's totally okay. But I'm going to go ahead and introduce Mark Junker. Mark has been the Tribal Response Coordinator for the Sac and Fox Nation of Missouri and Kansas and Nebraska since 2014. Holds a master's in curriculum with a BA in History and Social Science from Peru State College. As a Tribal Response Coordinator, he created both the Sac and Fox Emergency Response and Multi-Hazard Mitigation Plan. Thanks for joining us, Mark.
Oh, I'm definitely glad to be here. Really do appreciate the information that Doug always gives us. He's one of the people that really got us involved in this whole situation, and not just us, but all the tribes around here, especially the ones in Kansas, but also the tribes in Nebraska and even Iowa. All 9 of us have been working on a project for going on about 5 years now, dealing with climate change, dealing with adaptation, resiliency. And part of that is our ability to watch and respond to drought. And it's really impacted a lot of different facets, not just within our environmental departments, but some of our other departments as well, and just trying to um, be ready for kind of worst case scenarios. As we looked at some of the things from the National Climate Assessment 4 years ago, we realized that we were probably going to be subject to a lot more severe storm events. I think that was the big takeaway. We weren't really in that drought area, although it did surround us. We're in a unique position where we see kind of, we've got influences from the Gulf, influences from the Northern Plains, and influences from the Rockies, all kind of coming together where we're at. And we have some unique, I think, climate scenarios, and some of these begin to show up in some of the data that we're collecting. Just a quick little map there of where we're located in the grand scheme of things. Our casino is about 30 miles away from us, but we're very close to the Prairie Band, Potawatomi, and the Kickapoo, and the Iowas are right next door to us. This is the Nemaha River. It's the northern border of the reservation. Quite often it's subject to flooding. Right now it's at about 68 or 9% of normal as far as stream flow. So we're not experiencing anything wholly out of the ordinary right now. Looking at some of the information that Doug just gave us, yes, it was a warm summer, but we didn't get a lot of the impacts that we see farther north along in the basin. This river empties into the Missouri about 5 miles from where this picture is taken on a railroad bridge. And when we started this project, we're really looking at creating a culture of adaptation, or just enhancing the culture that already existed within the tribe, doing a little bit of more extensive planning and analysis, and mitigating or creating ways to mitigate some of the effects that we're going to see. It all boils down to being resilient. It's kind of a tagline that we've been using for the past 3 or 4 years. It started with a pre-disaster mitigation plan. And if you look at some of this, is kind of a flyer we developed rather than printing off multiple copies of an 80-page plan. This kind of succinctly explained what the plan did. It took about 1.5 years to make this plan up. And really, it doesn't talk too much about drought. I think the third from the last bullet point is protect vulnerable populations from heat and drought. So it is on our radar. But as we kind of explored the community perspective, we saw that flood was probably more impactful, at least in their opinions. And in fact, we don't experience tremendous impacts from floods. We don't have people that are building in the floodplain. And as we began to explore, the kind of the flood drought relationship, you realize that if you prepare for one, you're in pretty good shape for the other as well. There's a lot of things that happen with drought that, if you're preparing for flood and you have capacity for that, you can also be better prepared for a drought as well. When we began ranking the hazards, again, this is from the entire list. This is what the people had to choose from. And even as we speak today, we're looking at redoing this mitigation plan and also creating a threat hazard identification risk analysis. We'll have a lot of people from the community coming Monday to our offices for a working lunch. And so a lot of the topics that we cover today are going to be very pertinent in the discussions that we'll have next week. As we began submitting some of this information to FEMA, we can look at about halfway down the page. We really wanted to minimize the economic impact of drought. and develop additional water supplies, and we have initiated that. We've got about $2 million that's going towards creating kind of emergency water line from Brown County to our housing on the reservation. So we've got some plans in effect, and it's all as a result from the work that we've been doing over the past 5 years. When we started making up this plan, we were looking at data, and we got data since we're right on the Kansas-Nebraska border from both Kansas and Nebraska. And as we looked at the numbers, Brown County ranked number 7. We've got, probably, in 7 years, they had 7 flash flood events. And so we were looking at this as not really a huge problem, and we needed to really rethink that in the past couple years. We've had some really tremendous flash flood events where we're getting 5 inches of water in just a matter of hours. And so this one threatened our trading post. We also had to close down offices because of backed up septic fields. We've had road closures, and we're used to working around those, but some of the damages to the building are being repaired even as we speak, basically. One of the other things we realized that came hand in hand with drought and flood was the need for stream bank stabilization. These are projects that require a lot of cooperation. The tribe only owns about 5 to 10% of the land on the reservation, so you need willing landowners, and those are few and far between in Indian country, at least where we're at. Another impact that we see from drought is going to be your Rangeland Fire. This was one from the one with the video is from February, and it's really not the time of year where you would expect to have to deal with fire. We usually have about 1 a year, but they're usually in the spring, usually associated with warmer weather. This is happening in February. We had one several years back that was basically caused by a combine catching on fire. So it can happen from a number of different causes, but seeing a Rangeland Fire in February was kind of odd, and definitely gave us some reason for concern. We do have some capacity to fight that, but it's pretty limited. That this is our fire department right here. But I do have some other pictures later of what they've done to this over the past year. And so when we do control burns, we now have this. It's the same vehicle with about $15,000 worth of add-ons to it. Looking at flash flooding and seasonal flooding, they really are two different things. This is the flash flooding again that occurred this year when we got about 5.5 inches of rain over a 4 or 5 hour period. This is the highway going through the reservation. The road there is one of the major roads to the reservation. It was basically a matter of having to take a lot of detours. The seasonal flooding is probably best illustrated by what you all see on the Missouri River. We did have a person come up from University of Missouri, a journalism student, and she was able to take up a drone. This was actually on the Iowa reservation right on the Missouri River, and it was really impactful, I think, to take a look and see that river flowing from bank to bank and realizing just how much force is involved, and the idea that we've already gotten people out of the way. It's not really a matter of life-threatening. Some of the property is still at issue. I mean, you can see center pivots and some farm equipment deep in the background there as people continue to work the floodplain. But I really appreciate the opportunity to see the footage from this drone and realize that this is happening right in front of us. It was pretty cool. Just to give you an idea, this is a chart. I was just looking this up today, as a matter of fact, and kind of seeing where we're at in the grand scheme of things for rain totals. And at the very end, that's today, the very end of that chart, the right-hand side, and we're about 1/10 of an inch below normal. But how you get to normal is really pretty interesting. And when we start studying drought and gathering data, it takes on a whole new dimension, because if you look at on June 24th, at the start of the day, we were pretty close to about 2 inches below normal. By the end of the day, we were over 2 inches above. So that was all the rain that caused that that flash flooding. And 5.5 inches of rain in a short period of time, it's difficult for any community to deal with. And I think we were pretty fortunate the impacts weren't greater than they actually were. This is the actual drought early warning system. It's a spreadsheet that Mike Hayes and NIDIS helped us with. You go through the various things. If I click on like the SPI or the drought monitor, it takes me right to Kansas. And here I have it at none. I kind of looked at it and I realized that we're right on that yellow line, and I decided to make it a D0. We do have, editorial control over this, and we have to interpret those numbers. And so I kind of wanted to give the indication that I think it's dry. There's different ways that I can err on that. And so we go through the SPI, which is the standard precipitation index for 30 days, 60 days, 6 months, and a year. And it just seems like we never really get more than about one standard deviation away from what's actually normal. I'm going to skip ahead to the stream flow. And as I told you, we're pretty close to normal here. We're at 68%. That's the Nemaha River, and that's done through a USGS gauge. And then went over to some of the outlooks. I like looking at those. I think I went to the eddy first. The eddy is the evaporative demand index, and it's a little bit tough to figure out. I've heard sometimes it's really good at predicting when you come out of drought rather than the onset of drought. And right now we're looking at about D1, which again indicates that we are in drought. And then here's the 6 to 10 day outlooks. We've also got the 8 to 14 day outlooks, and then the 3-month outlook as well. And so we've been charting this for almost 2 years. It'll be 2 years in December that we started charting this. We also chart things like the fire conditions. We just started doing that. And we also stopped charting the evaporative demand index. We lost our ability to get to that. But it's definitely been a pretty cool experience to work through this and see how the numbers that we have can maybe help us. Again, we're in a situation where we've never really seen what needs to work. This is an event that happened kind of in tandem with the flooding that we had. This happened on June 11th, so like a week before the floods. Really high wind event. And again, as we start looking at extreme weather, that's going to include things like the wind that comes with them and the hail. And if you take a look at the video there, you can see that canopy, it's starting to sway a little bit. And how you prepare for wind events is just kind of a matter of engineering. You can see some potential pitfalls with that canopy setup. All the posts are lined up in a straight line, which creates for the ability to reverb a little bit. But I like showing this just because it does show the effects and some of the things that we're dealing with. And wind is definitely something that we need to be aware of going forward, as much as any of the other climate things that are coming. And wind's a lot more difficult to track. If you look at any given day or any given year, you see the wind basically blows about 25% of the time from each direction. At least that's what our air person explained to me before she left. So there goes the canopy. It was definitely a great video to be able to have. The interesting thing about this is we managed to have it cleaned up, and we're selling gas about 3 hours later, which is in itself pretty phenomenal. I did slow it down a little bit so you can see it one more time coming off the rails there. But right now we're working on actually doing some repairs to our building that include things like stormproof doors. We've got a lot of flooring that needs to be repaired. We've got a septic sewage system that needs to be rerouted, and we're putting on new gutters. So a lot of things that we're doing to be a little bit more resilient. This also serves as a community storm shelter. So we'll use this area as you know, when we're out of power, we have generators to this, so we can put people in there. We used it a couple times during the summer. Along with that high wind event came a lot of down power lines. We had 100-degree temperatures in predicted, and you know, people on oxygen without power. So we opened up the community building. We did have 5 or 6 people take advantage of some coffee that we provided, at least some shade and cool air for a time being while they restored the power. But we were without power for a little over 24 hours. That's what I have for y'all today. If you've got any questions, I'd be more than happy to go ahead and answer them or try to answer them. And of course, Denise and all the people that help with this, you can ask them questions too.
Yeah, thanks so much, Mark. Any questions, feel free to take yourself off mute or you can put them in the chat.
Hey, Mark, this is Denise.
Yeah.
The storm shelters, see, that's something that I'm really kind of interested in around here is making sure that we have designated storm shelters. And then in tangent with that, how did you, okay, along with comes the generators and the preparation of making sure that you have enough water and all the, waste facilities and all that. I mean, who is all involved in that? I'm sure yourself and your wastewater operators, water operators.
Yeah, it definitely was a lot of people involved in the effort, and I think as far as a funding agency, again, that's pretty diverse as well. I think the generators were probably the easiest of all the projects. We received about $5,000 from the state of Kansas a couple years in a row. And each of those years we purchased generators and had them installed with the building. With the work that's being done to the building, the physical structure itself, that's FEMA. And my boss, Lisa, she's really responsible for organizing and submitting all the requests for funding for that. I know it's been a tremendous amount of work for her to put all that together. And we're kind of breaking it down into chunks. And then the drain field, that's going to be done through BIA and IHS. And so those are the 3 main partners in this particular project. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, I did. I had another question, but now I forgot what it is. Yeah, thanks, Mark. If I think of it, I'll surely send you an email.
All right, appreciate it.
Uh-huh.
And I know this webinar was meant to be kind of a drought focus point, but I really appreciate Mark talking a little bit more broadly about his program, particularly with the recent publication that came out in the journal Science that talks about the intergenerational inequities and exposure to climate extremes and the dramatic increase in extreme events that we're going to see in the next generation. So that's a really timely piece.
Right. And we really did focus on drought a couple years ago. A couple months pre-pandemic, we met up at Santee and put together these drought early warning system spreadsheets, and we've been using them ever since. And all the tribes were represented there. We had a really good turnout. I'm not sure if anyone other than Denise and I are actually really keeping up on them on a week-to-week basis. And it's really kind of interesting as we've got some data to look at now, and NIDIS is going to help us kind of make sense of what we've accumulated so far. And again, I'd invite Denise to jump in, because I think she's seeing things more on the drought side. She's got numbers, and I try to talk to her, once a month or so about, what are you seeing? Because when I'm looking at the map, it looks like they're really, really dry up there.
Yeah. It looked like, Jeff, you had your hand up. I don't know if you still wanted to ask a question.
Yeah, maybe give me a second to unmute and start a video. Is that showing through?
Yeah.
Sound check. Great. So it's great to see Doug again. It's been a while. I worked with him back when I was with the North Central Climate Science Center. I currently work in the with the Forest Service at the Rocky Mountain Research Station in the Human Dimensions Program. And so really appreciate the presentation, Mark, especially the what caught my attention was the issue related to rangeland fires. And I guess maybe this is putting a placeholder in further conversations with NOAA or others kind of in the central US is to think about how, because there's not a lot of Forest Service lands out there. However, there has been a lot of research or work relative to fire, fuel suppression, prioritizing quantitative risk assessment values at risk, how to control fires when they become big and out of control. And I think that invasive species are kind of becoming more an issue in the regard of that intersection with fire kind of in the Missouri River Basin. So maybe it's a question to Mark or Doug relative to any Forest Service role in or processes that are used in kind of fire fuel mitigation and active fire suppression and post-fire recovery. And maybe there's an opportunity to think about that a little bit further in some of the interagency activities.
Just a couple things, Jeff. And if there was a Weather Service person on here, they could probably say a lot more than I could. But in terms of dealing with issues after a major fire, like they did in Colorado this year, is a great example. And of course, that's not grassland, that's mountains. And the fact that they had so many mudslides on that land that had burned the year before, those are big issues, closing interstates and things like that, right? I'm saying NOAA, Weather Service, watch that very closely in terms of longer term impacts, I guess you would say. We know where those burn scars are, for example. Grasslands and such, there's a fire weather program within the Weather Service. So they are on it in terms of, to some degree. I'm sure there's always room to learn more from your Forest Service grassland responsibilities and such, your areas. I don't know, those are local offices, so they talk to all kinds of folks on getting information on certain areas. And those red, I call them red. I call them red alerts, but they're, oh God, I forgot what the fire alerts that we put out, and you can see them online for various areas are not uncommon for large parts of this basin, right? So I'm not sure how the Forest Service works with us, to be honest, on a office by office basis. But that certainly, Jeff, you and I could talk more about that someday. Sure.
Yeah. Why don't you guys definitely keep chatting about that? Denise, it looks like you have your hand up, and then we're going to go to Crystal.
NBIA.
Yeah, one of the things I noticed, now it could be just a dual-edged sword here, is out in the field, and Jeff, we actually have a lot of forest lands on the reservation and the Omaha reservation, but one of the things I noticed that kind of surprised me was the type of vegetation that has survived through this drought situation, and how much quicker the type of vegetation that is out there has matured. They grow, of course we're at the end of the growing season, but it's already seeded. It's already seems so accelerated, and I don't know if it's just because we're in the drought, or that the type of vegetation that is surviving is maturing and it's seeding, and I'm a little alarmed about it because I don't know if that type of vegetation, I don't know how to read it. I don't know if that might produce more fuel for the fire, and I just wanted to throw that out there, that maybe we might want to talk about that in maybe an upcoming webinar or something.
And Jeff, if you want to put your email in the chat, that'd be a good way for folks to reach out to you and kind of follow up.
Hey, Stefan, just a quick note on maturation. This year was way ahead of normal for all crops, and therefore I'm guessing all vegetation because of heat, mainly because of the amount of heat, and we call them heating degree days, growing degree day heat, whatever. So crops were ahead of normal. So guys are out there harvesting well ahead of normal in most places.
Yeah, thanks for that, Doug. Now for Crystal Stiles, our last speaker. Crystal, for the last 7 years, was an applied climatologist with the High Plains Regional Climate Center at the University of Nebraska-Lincoln, where she directed both the stakeholder and tribal engagement programs. She's also worked on projects with National Drought Mitigation Center. Crystal received her PhD in Natural Resources Sciences with a specialization in climate assessment and impacts from UNL, University of Nebraska-Lincoln. Go ahead, Crystal.
Yeah, thanks, Stefan. I'm going to wrap the webinar up with just a few minutes to talk to you a little bit about some drought resources and some upcoming events that may be of interest to you. There's a lot of links on these slides, but Molly is going to be kind enough to actually copy and paste those into the chat box if you want to grab those. And I know this will be available later on for you to look at as well. So just keep that in mind. Next slide, Stefan. Thanks. So there are a number of drought resources available to help you keep up with the current conditions and the future outlooks. The first one here is the U.S. Drought Portal, which is drought.gov. And it has a great deal of data. It has a lot of maps, lots of tools that you might find useful. On the site, you can actually sign up for alerts on the local or county pages, so that anytime the drought status on the drought monitor changes in your area, then you would be alerted. Also, we have a tribal page. It's just drought.gov/tribal. And the U.S. Drought Monitor Map is at the top of the page with tribal land boundaries overlaid. So hopefully that's more helpful. There's also information about drought impacts and planning that's specific to tribal nations. So I encourage you to check that out. The next resource is the U.S. Drought Monitor. Doug showed this several times. This map is published weekly on Thursday mornings. And it's a broad scale depiction of drought severity across the U.S. So you may find it useful to check out the new map each week to see how conditions in your area might have changed. So brand new map came out this morning, you can check out. Next is the Missouri Basin Quarterly Climate Impacts and Outlook. And this is a 2-page document that gets published in September, December, March, and June. So we've had one just released talking about the summer months and the conditions that were going on, as well as the fall going into winter outlook. This is really great if you don't have a lot of time to keep up with conditions. It's 2 pages. It has lots of graphs and pictures and things. It doesn't take very long to read, but it is really for the Missouri Basin as a whole. So on the link that's provided, you just scroll down a little bit and you'll see all those reports featured there. There's also the North Central U.S. Monthly Climate and Drought webinars. Doug talked about these. These webinars are held at 1 p.m. Central Time on the 3rd Thursday of every month. So each month, the climatologist talks about recent conditions and impacts and outlooks across the North Central U.S. At the end, there's a question and answer session. And so generally they last about an hour. And the first link there is where you can go to register or sign up for them. And you have the option of signing up for all of them at one time, so you don't have to do it every month. If you miss a webinar, we do capture those, and you can get an archive of the webinar itself or the slides if you just want to look at the slides at the second link there. And finally, if you're interested in what the outlooks are saying, you can go to the Climate Prediction Center's website. There are temperature and precipitation outlooks for several different time ranges. I think Doug showed several. They range anywhere from 6 to 10 days up to seasonal outlooks. And there's also a monthly and seasonal drought outlook that you can find there. So hopefully these resources will be useful. Next slide, please. And then there's also some upcoming events and some news that we just wanted to share with you. The first one is the Northern Great Plains U.S. Climate Resilience Toolkit just launched this month. And so in the toolkit, you can get climate information, impacts, projections, tools for building resilience in several areas. So you can look at water, agriculture, ecosystems and biodiversity, and recreation and tourism. And again, this is all focused on the Northern Great Plains. There is a section on indigenous peoples, and it's interesting because there's some examples in there of how tribal nations are proactively planning for climate change and adapting to climate change. So I really encourage you to check it out. A lot of work went into that toolkit, and it's really great. For the second bullet, the U.S. Department of Agriculture is soliciting nominations for members on their Equity Commission, and also nominating or looking for nominations for the Subcommittee of Agriculture. And they have specifically mentioned tribal nations, and they are really encouraging tribal members to apply. So the link there will take you to the full press release from USDA. It tells you how to nominate someone or nominate yourself. So if you or you know someone who might be interested, then they are very much interested in getting those nominations. Finally, we just wanted to make you aware that the Great Plains Tribal Water Alliance is having a water and flood resources workshop, and it's next Tuesday in Rapid City with a virtual option as well. And this workshop, it came from a BIA tribal resilience grant that was awarded to the Oglala Sioux tribe. There's going to be a really strong focus on monitoring in the Dakotas, kind of the state of that, as well as discussions on how to fulfill unmet monitoring needs and how to improve upon flooding response and planning. And drought will be discussed as well, just because everyone's dealing with drought, although it is really more focused on flooding. So that's all I have, and I will turn it back to Stefan.
Stefan, we can't hear you if you're talking.
Any questions for Crystal? Thanks for letting me know, Molly. It looks like a bunch of those resources that Crystal just mentioned are in the chat, so feel free to check those out. Just going to mention before we close that this webinar was recorded, and so it will be on the North Central Climate Adaptation Science Center YouTube channel. You can find that link in the chat there. It should be up later today. Any last questions for any of our speakers before we close? All right, well, thank you everyone for joining. If you have ideas for future webinars, are interested in engaging with any of our speakers, or just have any questions, you can reach out to me. My email is in the chat there, and I love hearing from folks and just chatting. So yeah, feel free to reach out. Thank you to all of our speakers, Mark, Doug, and Crystal. And thank you to all of you for joining today. Have a good one.